25 million. Just fuel for my next move.
I'm Jake Morrison, 34, software engineer from Denver. Was married to Emma Lancaster for 3 years after meeting her at a tech conference where she was working PR for some startup that folded 6 months later. We had what seemed like a solid relationship. Bought a house in Highlands Ranch with a mortgage that was slowly eliminating us financially. Both had stable jobs. Talked constantly about starting a family once we got our finances sorted out properly. I'd been working at TechFlow Industries for 3 years, developing this revolutionary logistics AI system during my spare time using my own equipment at home on weekends and late nights after work. The system could predict supply chain bottlenecks and optimize routing in ways that would save companies millions annually in operational costs. My boss, Rick Davidson, was this typical corporate snake who took credit for everyone else's innovative work while driving a BMW that cost more than I made in a year and had this condescending way of dismissing any technological innovation that didn't come from his own mediocre brain. Everything imploded on what became the absolute worst day of my life. Got called into Rick's corner office on a Tuesday morning. This glass-walled monument to middle management ego decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and corporate synergy, expecting maybe a project discussion or quarterly performance review. Rick had been acting strange for weeks, avoiding eye contact during team meetings and giving me these weird looks when he thought I wasn't paying attention to his behavior. Instead, this smug a-hole fires me out of nowhere like I'm some intern who got caught stealing office supplies from the supply closet. Budget cuts and streamlining operations, he says, not even bothering to look up from his computer screen while delivering this corporate capital punishment like he's ordering lunch from the cafeteria downstairs. Nothing personal, Jake. Nothing personal, my A. This guy had been gunning for me ever since I pitched an AI innovation idea that made his outdated legacy systems look like they belonged in a technology museum next to rotary phones and fax machines. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife and serve at a dinner party for the gods of cosmic justice. After 3 years of consistent 60-hour weeks, skipping family dinners because Rick needed urgent revisions on presentations that could have waited until Monday, missing weekend plans because he'd schedule emergency meetings on Saturdays that accomplished nothing, practically living at that office like some corporate hermit crab who'd forgotten what natural sunlight felt like. I'm walking out with a cardboard box of personal belongings. Coffee mug with my university logo that had seen better days, some ballpoint pens that probably didn't work anymore, a few coding reference books with dog-eared pages, and a half-dead succulent plant that had been tortured by fluorescent office lighting for months. Real dignified exit, exactly how you picture getting fired in those corporate nightmare movies where the little guy gets screwed by the system while executives get golden parachutes. But here's where my life turned into a nightmare comedy that would make the writers of The Office cringe with secondhand embarrassment. I drive home that afternoon, my head spinning with financial panic about our mortgage payments and car loans, ready to tell Emma the devastating unemployment news and maybe figure out our next financial survival strategy together as a married team. I'm rehearsing how to break the news gently, maybe suggesting we order pizza and have a serious conversation about our monthly budget, thinking about stopping to grab some wine to soften the blow of sudden unemployment. Instead, I walk into our bedroom, our damn bedroom that we'd decorated together during happier times, painted together on weekends, where we'd planned our entire future together. To share the worst career news of my life and get a front row seat to my wife getting absolutely demolished by Rick Davidson on our marital bed. The bed with those stupid, expensive Egyptian cotton sheets she'd insisted we absolutely needed from that boutique downtown. Jake, we need quality linens if we're going to be serious adults with proper home aesthetics. The ones that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget and took me 3 months of overtime pay to afford without going into credit card debt. They weren't scrambling around in panic or desperately trying to cover up like you'd expect from people caught destroying someone's marriage in spectacular fashion. They just stopped their horizontal workout session and looked at me like I'd interrupted something mildly inconvenient instead of obliterating my entire world and everything I thought I knew about my life and relationship. Emma looks at me with zero guilt, zero shame, zero remorse. Just pure annoyance like I'd walked in during her favorite Netflix show or interrupted an important conference call with her personal trainer. Her perfectly styled blonde hair wasn't even messed up, which somehow made the whole betrayal feel even more calculated and insulting than if I'd caught them in some spontaneous moment of passion. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was a regular Tuesday afternoon appointment that I'd rudely interrupted by coming home to my own house that I was paying the mortgage on. Rick, that piece of absolute garbage, actually had the balls to smirk at me and say, "You should have seen this coming, buddy. This is all part of the master plan you were too stupid to figure out on your own." Like my marriage ending and career destruction was some corporate strategy I'd failed to anticipate in my quarterly life projections. I'm standing there watching my marriage implode in real time while legal documents worth $25 million are literally scattered across our hardwood floor like the world's most expensive confetti at the world's worst celebration. The contract folder had slipped from my hands when I saw them together. Important papers mixing with dust bunnies under our dresser that Emma always complained I never cleaned properly during my weekend chores. That morning before the firing, I'd received this incredible contract offer from Medicor Technologies wanting to license my logistics AI for their entire North American healthcare supply network. The same technology Rick had just claimed was developed on company time with company resources, which was complete damn BS since I'd built it at home on my personal computer during weekends and late nights when Emma was supposedly working late at her marketing job. Turns out these sociopaths had been orchestrating this elaborate betrayal for over 18 months. Possibly longer, according to what we discovered later. Emma wasn't just cheating on me with my boss. She was running a full-scale corporate espionage operation that would have impressed CIA operatives, feeding Rick detailed insider information about my work progress, my technical breakthrough moments, my late-night coding frustrations when I'd complain about difficult algorithms, even my daily schedule, and when I'd be working late at the office versus home. Found email chains later where they discussed my project development timelines like I was some laboratory experiment they were monitoring for their doctoral dissertation research, complete with progress reports and quarterly assessments of my emotional state and vulnerability levels. One email from 3 months earlier made my blood boil. Rick to Emma. Jake's getting close to finishing the AI project. He's been working until 2 a.m. every night this week, according to your reports. We need to accelerate our timeline for the patent filing. The incorporation papers for Lancaster Innovations should be finalized by Friday. Emma's response was even worse. Perfect timing. I've been documenting his progress in detail and photographing his code notebooks when he's in the shower. He's so focused on impressing you at work that he's completely oblivious to what's happening right under his nose. They've been planning to steal my intellectual property, patent it under their shell corporation, and cut me out of my own life's work while I was busting my A, thinking I was building our shared future together as a married couple. Emma's parents, Harold and Patricia Lancaster, are old money Denver elite who own half of Cherry Hills Village and treat anyone making under 7 figures annually like peasant servants. These people had inherited wealth going back 4 generations and acted like they'd personally built the railroad through Colorado with their bare hands. Called me to their mansion the next day for what they euphemistically termed a family discussion about this unfortunate situation that needs to be resolved quickly. The place screamed generational wealth in the most obnoxious way possible. Marble everything imported directly from Italy. Original artwork worth more than most people's houses hanging casually in hallways like decorative wallpaper. Fountains in the front yard that probably required their own water treatment facility. And a circular driveway longer than my entire street that wound through perfectly manicured gardens maintained by a full-time landscaping crew. Harold was nursing bourbon at 10 a.m. like some Southern gentleman cosplayer, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my Honda Civic and sporting a Rolex that could have paid off my remaining student loans in cash. Patricia was clicking her pearl necklace nervously like worry beads while wearing one of those outfits that screamed, "I shop at stores without price tags and make the salespeople call me ma'am." They basically told me I was never good enough for their precious princess daughter, that Rick was a real man, a provider with proper breeding and social class. Patricia actually used the word breeding like we were discussing racehorses instead of human relationships, while Harold nodded approvingly like this was some board meeting where they were voting me out of the family corporation due to poor performance metrics. Then Emma shows up to this family tribunal with Rick trailing behind her, his hand possessively placed on the small of her back like he owned her as property. She's wearing this expensive designer dress I'd never seen before, something clingy and obviously costly that probably required more than my monthly rent payment, looking happier and more radiant than she'd been in the final months of our marriage when she was supposedly finding herself professionally. That's when I dropped the nuclear bombshell about my $25 million Medicor contract on their perfectly arranged social gathering. The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful, watching their smug faces shift from condescending superiority to pure shock and confusion in real time like a slow-motion car crash. They had no idea I'd already signed exclusively with Metacore while Rick was still desperately trying to work backdoor licensing deals through TechFlow's existing corporate partnerships. So I'm living in this absolutely crappy apartment on the wrong side of Denver, cracked walls with peeling wallpaper that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration, a kitchen that belonged in a horror movie about urban decay, and neighbors who apparently thought 2 a.m. was prime time for domestic arguments and amateur karaoke sessions that could wake the dead, surviving on nothing but Chinese takeout from the sketchy place down the street, and self-pity that tasted worse than their questionable lo mein, contemplating the smoking ruins of my life while trying to figure out how I'd missed all the obvious signs of a conspiracy that had been happening right under my nose for over a year. When my college buddy Sarah Chen calls, I'm probably at my lowest point since graduating and realizing the real world didn't give a crap about my computer science degree or academic achievements. Sarah's this brilliant forensic business analyst who runs a corporate investigation firm specializing in white-collar crime and corporate espionage cases that make national news. We'd bonded over late-night coding sessions and mutual hatred of pretentious computer science professors who thought they were destined to become Silicon Valley gods despite never working in actual industry. "Get dressed," she tells me when I answer the phone, sounding like hot garbage warmed over in a microwave. "I'm coming over and we're going to figure this crap out like actual adults, instead of letting you wallow in self-pity. And for the love of all that's holy, please tell me you've showered in the last 48 hours. Sarah had this way of making you want to be better, even when you felt like absolute garbage and had given up on basic human hygiene standards. What Sarah uncovered over the next week was absolutely mind-blowing in its scope and audacity. Like discovering your spouse isn't just cheating, but running an entire organized crime operation from your basement. Rick had been systematically embezzling TechFlow resources through something called Lancaster Innovations LLC, Emma's maiden name, naturally, because they weren't even trying to be subtle about their criminal conspiracy. They'd legally incorporated this shell company to develop cutting-edge logistics software that was actually my damn technology, the same AI system I'd spent 3 years perfecting in my spare time on my personal laptop while sacrificing weekends, social life, and sleep. Bank statements showed systematic fund transfers going back 14 months, falsified expense reports claiming business conferences that were actually romantic spa weekends in Napa Valley and Austin, fake consulting fees paid to Lancaster Innovations for market research that never actually happened. Rick had been literally using company credit cards to finance his affair with my wife, billing shareholders for hotel rooms at 5-star resorts like the St. Regis and Four Seasons, expensive dinners at restaurants like the Capitol Grill that I couldn't afford on special occasions, and even jewelry, including that diamond necklace Emma wore at their engagement party, like some kind of trophy from her successful corporate heist operation. But the conspiracy went even deeper than simple financial fraud. This was like discovering an iceberg where the affair was just the visible tip above water. Sarah found email chains proving Emma had been accessing confidential company information through Rick's executive privileges, including employee files, salary information, quarterly financial reports, strategic planning documents, and detailed timelines of my personal development projects that should have been classified. She'd been spying on me for months like some corporate Mata Hari, reporting back to Rick about when I'd be working late, what technical breakthroughs I was making, even my frustrations with specific coding problems that kept me up at night debugging until 3 a.m. while she pretended to sleep beside me. One email exchange made my arterial pressure spike so hard I thought I might have a stroke. Emma to Rick: "He'll never bounce back from this humiliation. I know him better than anyone, and he doesn't have the backbone to fight back. Once we have the technology secured and he's completely out of the picture, we can move forward without any complications or loose ends to deal with." Sarah connects me with Marcus Kim, this absolute shark lawyer who specializes in corporate fraud, intellectual property theft, and white-collar conspiracy cases that make headlines on CNN and get featured in documentary films. Marcus had previously defended whistleblowers against Fortune 500 companies and had a reputation for making corporate executives cry during depositions while extracting multi-million-dollar settlements. Marcus's office was exactly what you'd expect from Denver's most ruthless corporate attorney. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline, leather furniture that probably cost more than my Honda, and law books arranged with the kind of precision that suggested he actually read them instead of just using them for decoration like most lawyers. The man himself looked like he'd been designed in a laboratory specifically for intimidating opposing counsel, sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of predatory smile that made you want to check your wallet afterward. This isn't just infidelity and simple corporate theft, he tells me with this gleam in his eyes that probably cost his enemies millions in legal settlements over the years. And this is federal conspiracy involving systematic fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and intellectual property theft. We're going to completely obliterate these people in court and make them wish they'd never heard your name or thought about crossing you. The next 3 weeks were like preparing for total legal warfare against people who thought they were completely untouchable due to their wealth and social connections. Sarah worked 18-hour days building our case file, which eventually grew to over 400 pages of documented evidence, while Marcus crafted federal court documents that read like criminal indictments for a RICO prosecution. We had bank records showing systematic embezzlement totaling over $180,000 in misappropriated funds, email chains proving premeditated conspiracy spanning 18 months with written plans and timelines, falsified expense reports documenting corporate theft that would make Enron executives embarrassed, recorded phone conversations discussing the precise timeline for destroying my career and stealing my technology, credit card statements showing luxury purchases made for personal use with company funds. Everything needed to prove this wasn't some spontaneous affair, but a calculated campaign of betrayal that would have impressed organized crime families. Meanwhile, Rick and Emma were planning their engagement party like some royal wedding celebration with a guest list that read like Denver's social register and cost more than most people's annual salaries. Actually sent me an invitation on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing and calligraphy that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Emma Lancaster and Rick Davidson at the Lancaster family estate. The subtext was crystal clear. Come watch us publicly humiliate Jake while wearing cocktail attire and sipping Dom Perignon that costs more than his monthly rent because we want to twist the knife in front of everyone who matters in Denver's social hierarchy. The smart move would have been staying home, ordering pizza, binge-watching something mindless on Netflix, and preserving what little dignity I had left after the whole affair discovery became Denver gossip fodder that spread through country clubs like wildfire. But apparently common sense had vacated the premises along with my marriage, my job, and my self-respect. I showed up at the Lancaster mansion that Saturday night, walking into what felt like enemy territory, watching Denver's social elite sip champagne that probably cost more than my car payment, while Emma glowed about her upgrade to a real man with actual prospects, and Rick toasted to leaving behind people who couldn't keep up with real success and ambition in the modern economy. The mansion had been transformed into something that looked like a movie set for rich people having the time of their lives. String lights hanging from every tree that had probably been imported from Europe, ice sculptures that cost more than my monthly budget carved by artists flown in from God knows where, servers in crisp white uniforms circulating with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that I couldn't even pronounce, let alone afford on my current unemployment budget. Emma was holding court near the marble fireplace like some debutante queen receiving admirers, wearing a dress that screamed, "I'm celebrating my freedom from my loser husband," while showing off that diamond necklace that caught the chandelier light every time she moved her head to accept congratulations. The thing probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and she kept touching it like some kind of victory medal commemorating her successful betrayal campaign. That's when David Park walked in like he owned the place, which frankly he probably could have bought with pocket change from his quarterly dividend payments. CEO of Medicor Technologies, worth approximately $4 billion according to Forbes' latest billionaire rankings, supposed to be in Singapore closing some massive international healthcare deal that had been splashed across every business publication for the past month. But he'd flown back specifically to support our partnership because it was that strategically important to his company's future expansion plans into AI-driven healthcare logistics. David Park was the kind of person who commanded attention just by existing in a room. Not particularly tall or physically imposing, but he had this presence that made everyone else feel like background characters in his success story. The room went dead silent like someone had hit a pause button on all these entitled lives. These people weren't used to being upstaged at their own carefully orchestrated social events. especially by someone who could literally buy and sell half the guests without checking his bank balance or consulting his team of financial advisors. David walks straight through the crowd to me, cutting through the social hierarchy like a hot knife through butter, shaking my hand firmly enough for everyone to see and photograph with their phones, and announcing our partnership loud enough for the entire shocked assembly to hear clearly. Jake isn't just a guest tonight, he tells the crowd with that commanding presence that comes from running billion-dollar corporations. He's my business partner. The $25 million contract we signed last week is just our initial investment. We're projecting billion-dollar market impact across North American healthcare logistics over the next 5 years. Emma's champagne flute-wielding confidence cracked like ice in warm water, her perfect smile starting to wobble around the edges as she realized her pathetic loser husband had just been publicly endorsed by one of the most powerful men in healthcare. Rick looked like he might vomit right there on the imported Italian marble floor, his face going from smug pink to absolutely green as the implications of losing my technology to a direct competitor hit him like a freight train loaded with karma. We filed everything the following Monday morning, like we were launching nuclear weapons at corporate corruption. Federal fraud charges, conspiracy to commit intellectual property theft, systematic embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. Marcus had prepared the complete legal arsenal that would make RICO prosecutors jealous of our evidence collection. He'd timed the process serving for maximum public humiliation. Rick and Emma got hit with federal lawsuit papers during their intimate engagement brunch at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, surrounded by Denver's biggest gossips and social media influencers who immediately started live tweeting the drama unfolding before their eyes. According to our process server Tony, who looked like he could bench press a small car and had previously served papers to mafia bosses without breaking a sweat, Emma completely lost her crap when she realized what was happening. Threw her mimosa at him, missed completely, and hit her own father instead, soaking Harold in Dom Perignon and fresh orange juice while Patricia's screaming was audible from the lobby 3 floors down. The trial 6 weeks later was absolutely incredible theater that had reporters from 3 different news stations, plus freelance bloggers covering every dramatic moment. Rick and Emma hired the most expensive legal team money could buy, Morrison, Fletcher & Associates, the kind of white-shoe law firm that charged $800 per hour and had defended senators and Fortune 500 CEOs in major corruption cases that made national headlines. But you can't argue with 18 months of documented bank records, email chains with timestamps, and recorded conversations where they literally discussed their criminal conspiracy in detail. The prosecution had everything: systematic embezzlement totaling over $180,000 in misappropriated company funds, premeditated conspiracy spanning 18 months with detailed written plans, intellectual property theft with attempted patent fraud, and even audio recordings of them laughing about how they'd completely crushed me and I'd never bounce back from this total humiliation. Emma completely melted down on the witness stand like a nuclear reactor going critical. And it was the most beautiful train wreck I'd ever witnessed in person. All that expensive coaching from Morrison, Fletcher & Associates, all those legal preparation sessions that probably cost more than my annual salary, all that money spent on image consultants and media training. And she reverted to her true entitled nature right there in federal court, with cameras rolling and court reporters transcribing every word for posterity. Started screaming about how I was nothing, absolutely nothing, a pathetic nobody working in a cubicle going nowhere in life, while Rick offered real success, a real future, the kind of life I actually deserved as someone with class and breeding. She literally admitted under oath to marrying me under false pretenses and conspiring to steal my life's work because she fundamentally believed I wasn't good enough for her social status expectations. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes, not even long enough to order lunch from the courthouse cafeteria. When they returned, the foreman delivered guilty verdicts on all federal charges, with the grim satisfaction of working people watching entitled rich folks get exactly what they deserved after years of thinking they were above consequences. Judge Eleanor Hartman was legendary throughout Colorado's legal system for her zero-tolerance approach to white-collar crime and corporate fraud cases. Rick got 5 years in federal prison plus $750,000 in restitution payments to both Tech Flow Industries and me personally. Emma got 2 years federal time plus $500,000 in damages for her role in the conspiracy. Both were permanently banned from working in technology fields or any positions involving intellectual property or proprietary information. But the real victory wasn't watching them get led away in federal handcuffs by U.S. Marshals, while news cameras captured every humiliating moment, although that was pretty satisfying for my petty revenge-seeking soul. 6 months later, I launched Phoenix Ventures, an investment fund specifically designed to help innovators who've been betrayed by business partners, family members, spouses, or employers turn their betrayal into fuel for building something unstoppable. Started with $10 million of my own Medicore money as seed capital, and within 12 months, we were managing $75 million in funding for brilliant people who got screwed over and decided to fight back strategically instead of accepting permanent sufferer status. Our first funding round supported 12 different companies, all started by people who'd been told by their betrayers to sit down, shut up, and accept that life isn't fair, and betrayal is just part of business. The launch event was held at the Denver Art Museum because nothing says we've officially arrived like hosting your corporate debut in a building that looks like it was designed by aliens with unlimited budgets and excellent aesthetic taste. Forbes sent senior reporters and professional photographers covering it with a full spread and the headline, "The Man Who Turned Ultimate Betrayal into Billions." We've now funded 47 different companies with a combined market valuation exceeding $2 billion. And every single one has a founder who got screwed over by someone they trusted completely. The waiting list for our program has over 3,000 applicants, brilliant people who refuse to accept being sufferers and want to transform their betrayal into fuel for building something their enemies could never destroy or diminish. Emma tried reaching out from federal prison about 8 months into her sentence. Saw your success story in Forbes. Congratulations on everything you've built from nothing. Deleted the message without responding because some bridges are meant to stay completely burned as permanent reminders of why you struck the match in the first place. Currently engaged to Sarah, the forensic investigator who helped expose everything and stood by me during the darkest period of my life when I was living on takeout and self-pity. She saw me at my absolute lowest point and chose to help me fight back strategically instead of telling me to move on and let it go, like everyone else advised. Last month, Phoenix Ventures closed a $200 million Series B funding round. We're expanding nationally with new offices opening in Austin, Seattle, Miami, and eventually Silicon Valley. The business model is simple. Find brilliant people who've been betrayed and help them build something that proves every day how catastrophically wrong their betrayers were about their potential and worth. Rick gets out in 3 years if he behaves himself. Emma has 18 months left. By then, Phoenix Ventures will probably be worth more than the Lancaster family's entire generational wealth accumulation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and succeeding beyond your enemy's imagination. But even better revenge is building a billion-dollar empire from the ashes of their betrayal while helping hundreds of other people do exactly the same thing.